Today is Wednesday, April 2nd. We'll tell you about a Democrat's protest speech against President Trump that broke records in the Senate, and how more Republicans are being sent to Washington. Also, immigration officials sent one Maryland father to a notorious Salvadoran prison by accident, while the Trump administration now says it cannot do anything about it. Plus, top law firms make deals with the White House. 2 air traffic controllers come to blows, and Americans lose money on March Madness. Those stories and even more news to know coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. It was the longest Senate speech in American history, and it's being called one of the biggest acts of defiance against the second Trump administration. Democratic Senator Cory Booker condemned President Trump and his policies for more than 25 hours straight. He spoke about job losses, healthcare, housing, immigration, Social Security, free speech, public education, the cost of living, and America's role on the world stage, and a lot more. With that, Booker eclipsed Senator Strom Thurmond's filibuster of a civil rights bill. Booker says it always bothered him that the record for longest Senate speech belonged to someone who was trying to stop federal efforts to end segregation. And in topping his record, his speech garnered a lot more interest than it would have if he had kept it short. As the hours dragged on, tens of thousands of Americans watched on live streams. And some of his fellow Democrats say Booker gave them a much-needed morale boost as they deal with being the minority in Washington. But it was a physical and mental feat to overcome the record. Booker was not allowed to leave the Senate floor for any reason during his speech, including to eat or use the bathroom. He also wasn't allowed to sit. Booker was allowed to field questions, but that was his only break from speaking for over 25 hours straight. The White House dismissed the effort as a desperate attempt to get attention, and most Republicans also skipped the speech. Just 2 of them were on hand alongside Democrats to watch Booker break the record. Today is President Trump's so-called Liberation Day. It's the day he's planning to announce what he calls reciprocal tariffs on America's trading partners. Trump says they'll restore fairness, free Americans from a dependence on foreign goods, and stimulate the economy. But many critics, and even some of Trump's allies, have worried the new import taxes will lead to more inflation, economic uncertainty, and possibly even a recession. Trump himself has said there could be some short-term economic pain, but insists the long-term benefits will be worth it. The president is set to announce the exact details of these new tariffs today at the first Rose Garden event of his second term. He's calling it the Make America Wealthy Again ceremony, and the full cabinet is going to be there. Meanwhile, other countries are preparing to respond to these new taxes on their products. Of course, the exact response depends on exactly what gets announced today. So far, the White House says the tariffs will apply to all countries and take effect immediately. The U.S. deported a Maryland man who was in the country legally, and now he's stuck in a notorious supermax prison in El Salvador. The Trump administration says the man was deported because of an administrative error. But even though Immigration and Customs Enforcement acknowledged it made the mistake, it says there's nothing it can do to correct it, since it cannot force the Salvadoran government to release him. The man has lived in the U.S. under protected legal status for years now, and his wife and 5-year-old son are both American citizens. His family sued the Trump administration, asking the government to stop payments to El Salvador until he was returned. But the Trump administration has said no, explaining how that would jeopardize greater foreign policy goals. For now, the civil case against the Trump administration continues, as does the debate about deportation policies on a wider scale. Democrats are now claiming victory in the first major battleground state election of President Trump's second term. Last night, the more left-leaning judge won the open seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. It's a big deal since the state's highest court is likely to rule on crucial issues soon, like congressional redistricting, voting and labor rights, and abortion. President Trump and his mega-donor advisor Elon Musk endorsed the more right-leaning judge, so this is seen as a setback for them. But they have other victories to celebrate. 2 Trump-backed Republicans won special congressional elections in Florida yesterday, and that helped shore up the GOP's slim majority in the House. Tens of millions of Americans are now in the path of what's being called a once-in-a-generation flood event. Today, the severe thunderstorm risk spans from Texas to the Great Lakes, including big cities like Dallas, Chicago, and Indianapolis. Storms there could cause damaging winds, hail, and tornadoes. Torrential rain is also in the forecast starting today. And in some places like Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, and Tennessee, the rain will keep falling through the end of the week. The National Weather Service says that's where the generational flooding could come in. Some places could get an entire spring's worth of rain in just 4 days. We have more news for you still coming up, but first, this episode of The Newsworthy is sponsored by Huel. New customers can use my code Newsworthy to get 15% off your first order, plus a free gift. But if you're not familiar, Huel's Black Edition Ready to Drink is a meal in a bottle that will actually keep you energized because it has, get this, 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals, and is low in sugar. So in other words, Huel is just what you'll want to grab for those really, really busy days where you feel like you're just nonstop. You already know that skipping a meal in those days is not a good idea. Even when you're busy, it'll probably leave you drained and cranky. At least that's my experience. And grabbing fast food or an unhealthy snack is not likely to help you feel your best either. But Huel is such a quick, easy, and convenient way to keep yourself nourished. I've had the vanilla flavor so far, and I love having a bottle in the fridge, ready to grab and go on those especially busy days when I'm juggling getting my kiddo off to school, then rushing myself off to an appointment or a meeting. You'll want to have this on hand. And right now, new customers can visit Huel.com/newsworthy. That's HUEL.com/newsworthy and use my code Newsworthy to get 15% off your first order plus a free gift. Now back to the news. There are now more billionaires than ever before. Forbes just put out its yearly list of the world's wealthiest people. And this year, it includes 3,028 billionaires. The first time this number has passed 3,000. Altogether, they have an estimated $16.1 trillion to their names. That's more than the gross domestic product of every country except the U.S. and China. Also this year, there's a record number of centibillionaires. 15 people on the list have fortunes higher than $100 billion. The top 3 wealthiest people on the list are, in order, Tesla, SpaceX, and xAI CEO Elon Musk, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and Amazon's executive chairman Jeff Bezos. This year also welcomed nearly 300 new billionaires to the list, including celebrities like Bruce Springsteen, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Jerry Seinfeld. Some of America's most prominent law firms are making deals with the Trump administration. Willkie Farr is the latest. This week, it agreed to provide $100 million in pro bono services to help veterans combat anti-Semitism and ensure fairness in the justice system. To that end, President Trump says the firm also promised not to choose clients based on political views. Willkie Farr's executive committee put out a memo explaining this was the best way to avoid, quote, potentially grave consequences. President Trump has issued several executive orders to punish law firms for their connections to his perceived enemies. For example, law firms representing clients with pending lawsuits against the White House, or other firms whose lawyers investigated President Trump's ties to Russia, or helped Special Prosecutor Jack Smith with the classified documents case, just to name a couple of examples. Trump accuses them of weaponizing the judicial system, though critics say he's stepping on their constitutional right to free speech. Trump's orders have punished law firms by doing things like canceling security clearances or telling agencies to strip clients' government contracts. The president has promised to do even more with lawsuits, so some big law firms like Willkie Farr have taken deals. And when they do, the executive orders get canceled. Others have chosen to fight the orders in court, so to be continued. Hollywood actor Val Kilmer, best known for his roles in movies like Top Gun, The Doors, and Batman Forever, has died at the age of 65. His daughter told the New York Times he passed away from pneumonia yesterday. Kilmer has been a well-known movie star since the mid-'80s. His career was briefly put on hold when he got throat cancer years ago, and even though he recovered, treatments permanently damaged his speaking voice. His final on-screen moment came in Top Gun Maverick in 2022, where he reunited with Tom Cruise. Kilmer published a memoir in 2020 and was the subject of the 2021 documentary called Val, which his children helped to produce and narrate. In it, he said, "Now that it's more difficult to speak, I want to tell my story more than ever." Tributes are now pouring in online from fellow actors and fans. There are now even more questions about flight operations at Reagan National Airport. That's already been under intense scrutiny since a plane crash earlier this year. This week, an air traffic control supervisor at the Washington, D.C. airport punched a colleague in the control tower while they were both on duty. The Washington Post cites sources who say it all started with an argument about operations. The 2 air traffic controllers were apparently yelling at each other, and one punched the other in the face. Other controllers who were in the middle of communicating with aircraft then had to step away from their duties to intervene. The person who was first to start throwing punches got arrested. And now the FAA says he's on administrative leave while the incident is under investigation. 5 basketball players are now suspended for a fight that erupted and spilled into the stands at a recent NBA game. Detroit Pistons player Isaiah Stewart was suspended for 2 games. 4 other players from the Pistons and Minnesota Timberwolves drew 1-game suspensions. Overall, Sunday's Pistons-Timberwolves game featured 12 technical fouls. That's the most in an NBA game in more than 20 years. Speaking of fighting in sports, it seems YouTube star turned fighter Jake Paul is looking for his next big opponent after last year's spectacle with Mike Tyson. Paul says he's now offered $15 million to MMA star Nate Diaz. He also offered $4 million to Tommy Fury, the only man who owns a win over him at this point. And more offers are apparently still in the works. Well, that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Work Wednesday, when we break down one interesting career or work-related news story every Wednesday. But first, this episode is brought to you by OneSkin. It's spring now. You probably already know that protecting your skin against the sun's UV rays is a must, but so is nurturing it even beyond that. And OneSkin offers it all. Their SPF options block UV rays and neutralize the free radicals from UV, pollution, and blue light, while their products also have their scientifically proven peptide called OS1. So OS1 works at the cellular level to improve key aging biomarkers while also reducing the visible signs of aging, think lines, wrinkles, and sagging skin. So you're getting the best of both worlds. I can share that my personal experience using OneSkin's face and eye topical supplements aligns. I can tell the difference in how my skin looks and feels after using OneSkin regularly morning and night. It's also a super easy but effective routine. And I love that OneSkin was founded and led by an all-woman team of skin longevity scientists. OneSkin is redefining the aging process with the proprietary OS1 peptide, the first ingredient proven to help skin look, feel, and behave like its younger self. So get 15% off with the code newsworthy at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with the code newsworthy. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them we sent you. Invest in the health and longevity of your skin with OneSkin. Your future self will thank you. Now back to Work Wednesday. With all the talk about tariffs, Americans may forget there's another factor that could be temporarily impacting the U.S. economy right now: March Madness. The sports betting and media brand Action Network looked at government data that shows each worker who watches the men's NCAA basketball tournament costs the economy about $1,800 in lost productivity. And considering how many college basketball fans there are in America, that could add up to about $20 billion when March Madness is all said and done. Why so much? Well, up until this point in the tournament, games have been in the afternoons during the work week, creating a pretty big distraction for fans trying to watch the games unfold and get their work done at the same time. It's also even easier for fans to watch at work now than it used to be, since there's a March Madness app that lets people watch games on nearly any mobile device. And even when there aren't games on, Action Network found people tend to spend about 2.5 hours a day doing other fan things, like checking scores and brackets. And a lot of fans don't even try to multitask. 40% of the thousands of people who answered Action Network's survey admitted to calling in sick to watch a March Madness game. Productivity is bound to pick up soon, though, since the tournament is almost done with. This weekend, it's the Final Four, followed by the national championship game on Monday. Thank you so much for listening today and for sharing the show. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.